For the next couple minutes, we're going to talk about some developments in the Vizor program. And specifically, John and I will go back and forth about the different developments. So without further ado, Allison, thank you so much for the question earlier today about the Vizor platform. It basically has teed up this slide. What we're trying to do is illustrate that the core underpinnings of the Vizor platform is being shared across all the different Visors, the suites of Visors that are delivered on top of it. So we started out with Impact Visor. Each of those bars represents a different module or viewer, if you'd like. That's part of that package. So Impact Visor will have a total of 7 Visors and possibly 8. Usage Visor, which is launching later this year, it will be having 4 initial Visors. And Social Visor is still in the ideation phase, and we're firmed up probably at 4 Visors, and John will talk specifically about what they might be. And if you look at the bottom in terms of the platform, we started out with an MVP platform, minimal viable product, just to get the platform started. We then rolled out platform administration earlier this year. We finished that up, I think, in the first quarter. Article and Institutional Usage Visor is going to be developed on the platform in 2016. We'll talk in a minute about alerts, Social Visor coming down the pike, and then Institution and Prospect Visor as well to expand and sit on top of the platform. One of the most popular Visors as part of the Impact Visor program is the Rejected Article Tracker. Now, I just heard bats in a previous presentation. This is our rat. Again, I think John did the marketing. No offense, John. So basically what the rat report helps you understand is where do my rejected articles get published? And the grid basically answers 2 questions within one visual. One is the size of the cubes determines the number of articles a particular journal has published. And then the color, red being the highest or deepest or most active color versus green being the coldest color, determines how many citations actually got picked up from those articles. So what you're looking at from a publisher's perspective is articles I reject, where do they go and how do they do? And we find that this report is stimulating a lot of conversation within publishers, and specifically around looking at their editorial processes. Why am I rejecting? What other criteria I'm rejecting? Am I missing an opportunity to repackage articles that I'm rejecting because of the nature of the content doesn't fit my current objectives? And could I possibly launch another journal by taking highly popular articles that don't fit within my current framework and repurpose them and create a journal to support those? And then of the articles I am rejecting, how often do they get cited, and are they working? Are they popular? And the citation information being captured there is clearly indicated by the depth of the color. And lastly, as within all the Visors, not only do we give you a graphic on top that gives you a perspective of what the information we're trying to communicate, but we also have the ability to drill down. So if you clicked on any one of those cubes, you could then see underneath it, it's a little obfuscated because of the confidentiality of the information. You can actually see the manuscript title and drill into the manuscript specifically to see exactly that title. So that if your editors ask, well, what article got published, you can, in that same meeting, in that same conversation, be able to drill down specifically into the article level detail. The other highly popular Visor within the Impact Visor family is Citation Trends, and that looks like at articles total cites by journal by year, and so basically asks what's the health of the journal. So this is like many of the Visors has a time-based element. So each of the columns is a year. The stack ranking relates to the number of citations within the first 12 months. In the blue in the bottom bar is basically articles that have been published with 0 citations in the first year. And it looks year on year over the course of the activities. Early citations, we think, are an indicator of future citations in terms of the popularity or the momentum or the potential for future citations. And it's a great, it's an important metric to measure. And then if you look at the top line bar, those in purple or actually in red, the darker colors at the very top of the bar chart indicate those highly popular articles in their first year of publication. So it's an important way to look at the publishing program over time. And the Visor program is one of the few places, and I believe it might be the only place, where you can get timestamps on your citations and get perspective over the course of time and do time slices about how your articles are performing in time and over time. Another thrilling eye chart has a ton of information, so let me walk you through it basically by column. It's again organized by year, 2013 through 2016, and it's basically looking at section performance. So as an editorial program, you can look at your publishing program in the language and in the taxonomy and the categorization of how your publication is organized. And you can see by citation, excuse me, by topic, you can see basically how a particular category is performing over time. And the power of this is, and came up in a conversation John and I were having with one of our publishers who made an argument 5 years back with the editorial board that said, you know, his perspective was that the topic they were trying to start and that they were so they were advocating wasn't going to be popular, and he knew that based upon his years in the journal, but didn't have any fact base he could look back and say here's why. Now that he was examining using Impact Visor to explore the publication and the performance of a section over time, he was actually seeing that what he had indicated was true. This is a logarithmic scale, so the size or the gap between the bar and the gold arrow, the goldenrod arrow line, excuse me, is basically the average for a particular part of the journal. And what they found was, and using Impact Visor, was that the particular section they had created 5 years ago was actually negatively affecting impact for the journal. So he got to prove himself right, and now the challenge was how to frame that up in a conversation with data that he could present back to his editorial board in a meaningful way to stimulate the conversation. We have other use cases and other reports back from the field where the analysis of using data-driven decisions has been extremely helpful in terms of looking at the relative health of a publishing effort. And it's important also to look at not necessarily citations, but also usage, and we'll have other conversations around usage in just a moment. Lastly, in terms of what's resonating with my journal, basically you can look at article title and look at the article-to-article comparison over time. And again, if you look at the columns, this is the first column in blue is the Mendeley saves. The middle column is cites per article, and the last is 12 months usage from publication. We think, and we have strong evidence to say that Mendeley saves is an early indicator of citation strength or future citations, if you'd like. Cites per article is obviously a clear metric. You can see that the goldenrod separator is the average number of cites for this particular journal. And then the 12 months usage from publication is actually given a clear indication of the popularity or access to that article for that publisher. One of the things I do want to mention within all the Visor programs is we use the same visual language across all the Visors. So once you get your head wrapped around how we present data in Impact Visor, when you look at usage visor or social visor, we'll use those same levels, those same ways to communicate information. There's an endless choice of graphical interpretations we can use based upon Tableau, the engine, if you like, that's underneath the Vizor platform. But we found that refining and constraining the amount of graphical information we present actually lends for better understanding, so you can bring your organization from one framework to another in a consistent way. And now John is going to take over and talk about Usage Visor.
Thanks, Jim. It's always fascinating to have someone else present something you've been involved with for 2+ years. You know, it's like my life flashing before me. I'm going to talk now about some of the new parts of the Visor suite that we're introducing. And this is really meant to be a taster. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth, more to show you what it does and approximately what the use cases are that we are working with. There will be 2 breakout sessions, one later today, one tomorrow, that drill down into some of these additional parts. So Usage Visor has 2 distinct sets of use cases. And when we started the work on this, interviewing customers, we only had one distinct use case. And we learned that we really needed to talk about usage. We needed to talk about article usage, but also about institutional usage. So the institutional usage lets you understand the patterns in looking at individual institutions. Article usage helps you understand how article usage of individual articles and then groups of articles add up. Article usage is very similar, and you'll see from the visuals that I show, article usage is very similar to Impact Visor's citation information. As Jim said, we try to use the same visual language to sort of conserve cognition bandwidth for you, so that as you get used to looking at hot articles in Impact Visor, well, it turns out hot articles in Usage Visor looks pretty much the same. I'm going to actually start by looking at article usage, then go on to institutional usage. So the hot article tracker, here it shows you which articles are performing best in usage metrics, as opposed to in Impact Visor, it's citation metrics. Here you can slice and dice data in all the ways you can in Impact Visor by any of your metadata, such as talk sections, collections, date of publication, date of usage. But you can also change what type of usage you want to look at. In other words, you could look at abstract-only usage, or all full text usage, or just PDF usage. So you can pretty easily choose what types of measures. And you can also say what period of usage. I want to look at just the first 3 months, or the first 12 months, or total usage. I should have mentioned there's also, in addition to hot articles, of course, there's cold articles. From the hat to the cat, to chase the rat, right? So you just flip a switch and you can look at which things have the least usage as well. I'm not going to show the example, but you can also roll up articles into groups of articles by simply saying, I'd like everything with a common metadata element to be summed up. So let me look at all of my clinical trials. Let me look at all of my case studies and look at their usage in aggregate. That lets you see which groups of articles are performing best. So you might say, oh, my case studies are really underperforming everything else in my journal in usage terms. Now, this is, the graphic is called a tree chart, and here what we're doing is letting you compare the usage measurement of groups of articles with the volume of publication. So this lets you take a look at whether I'm publishing a lot of articles in a particular topic or in a particular talk section or a particular type of article, and people are not proportionally reading those articles. You can see that some area, for example, clinical trials, might be a lot stronger in usage terms than an area like case studies. Or you might find that it's totally different than what you had expected. Of course, you can look at individual articles and see whether an individual article is still attracting strong usage. You can see whether its usage pattern has shifted. Here, the different lines on the chart show different types of content for a particular article. In other words, there's a line for abstract, there's a line for PDF, a line for HTML. And what you can see is a very strong uptick about 3 months into, not quite 3 months into the publication of this article. And in this particular case, it's when the print issue came out, which is kind of interesting. Now I'm going to go into institutional usage. So I'm going to switch from the article use case to the institutional use case. This is going to have a number of use cases, sub-use cases, where you're trying to figure out which institutions to pay attention to. Hopefully you have way too many that you can attend to all of them at once. So what we have are various ways to help you prioritize your time and attention. Which subscribers need your attention? And there are a couple ways of doing that. First, a good thing to understand is we can look very easily at the highest usage institutions or the lowest usage institutions. Either one of those might be a cause for you to pay attention to them. But just as you can with all other visors, you can slice and dice by various institutional characteristics, the metadata. So that could be what tier are they in, what location are they in, geographic location, what consortium are they in, what agent have you assigned to them, and so on. All of these are metadata fields that you could supply us or we can pull out of the subscription manager. One interesting but new for us use case for usage was to calculate cost per use. This came up as a very strong use case in the feedback we had from publishers. And I could see why in talking about it, because it's so hard to do. Libraries are doing it. So for you not to know cost per use data when the library is using it to make decisions is pretty important gap. So we have enabled you to provide us the data that we can use to give you cost per use. And of course, you can use cost per use in deciding where to pay attention. So for example, you can say, show me which institutions have a cost per use that's higher than my pay-per-view price, which you should know about. We also introduce now this thing we call a comparator. It's a new kind of capability that we've built. It lets you look not only at static values like the number of PDF downloads or what's the cost per use, but also at the change in a parameter from one period to another. And you can pick which parameter and you can pick which period. For example, you could say, show me the institutions with the greatest increase in use this year to date compared to last year to date. And that might be someone that you want to look at. Maybe two campuses have merged and suddenly your license is now covering twice as many people. Or show me where there's been the greatest drop in usage this year to date versus last year to date. That could be somebody who's changed their IP addresses at their institution but didn't tell you. And so they're essentially, you've got a customer service problem. Or you could say the same with cost per use. Show me all the institutions with the greatest increase in cost per use this month versus last month. So that's what's provided by these comparators. There's also something, you can do this with turnaway numbers as well. So not just look at institutional usage, but essentially non-usage, attempts at usage that were not successful. You might be a publisher who says, well, I only have one journal, or I have 2 journals, but they're sold as a bundle. How could I have turnaways? Well, you can actually have turnaways. Of course, you can have turnaways if you have many journals and you allow people to subscribe to only subsets of them. So if I subscribe to journal A but not B, and my campus tries to use B, that's recorded as a turnaway. But other types of turnaways, you can have lapsed subscribers. For example, someone who has not paid for the year and your grace period has expired. Or you can have, of course, canceled subscriptions. Someone who canceled in 2015 and it turns out their 2016 use or attempts at use is still pretty strong. So if we have IP addresses for you, we can calculate turnaways. I'm going to take a quick look at Social Visor. Again, just a brief introduction to it. Here, we also are using a lot of feedback we got from a number of publishers, 8 to 10 publishers, telling us about what they do now with social metrics and what they'd like to do with them. And what we're trying to do is bring Visor-style analytics to altmetric data, the donuts, basically. It's like, okay, suppose I could slice and dice donuts. I know it's before lunch, but just imagine. What we found in the feedback from people was that there were really 2 kinds of things that people wanted to track. They wanted to track what happened to things they posted. In other words, the Rockefeller University Press Facebook page, you post on it, and you want to know what happens there. But you also want to know what happens when an author posts something about his or her own article, or a reader does the same, but it's one of your articles. We call this by you and about you. And what we found talking with people was they felt that the by you category was pretty well handled by the native platforms. In other words, Twitter, Facebook, and so on have really good analytics built into them. So we focused on the about you category. And the reason for going into this is that people want to know, we were talking with people who want to know which articles resonate or which types of articles, groups of articles, resonate particularly in social media, and which platforms, that is, which media. Something works well on Twitter, something else works well in Facebook, for example. So, quick look. Now we have the hot article tracker, but it's applied to altmetric data. So you can look at which of your articles got the most attention in social media. But this mock-up shows that you can also look at specific types of social engagement to focus on the channels that you care about. So you might say, look, I really don't care about Pinterest. Take it out of the list. I don't care about Publons, maybe I don't care about PubPeer. Or you might say, I really want to investigate what's resonating in the news channels. In other words, things like the New York Times. Just show me those numbers. So that's the kind of thing you can do with the hot article tracker. Of course, you can look over time. This is just a mock-up. So you might be able to say, oh, what I see is over the last few years, the attention to my content in social channels has changed. I'm getting a lot more attention now from Twitter than I am from Facebook, and maybe the New York Times has just about stopped paying attention to me. What do I want to do about that? Well, you might decide that you're going to task someone to pay more attention to the Times and feed the Times more information. Or you may say, no, that's really not a good channel for my literature anyway. I'm really going to focus more on the channels that are strongest and go emphasize those. And you can also do this. This is again a mock-up. But here you're looking at what's working for your competitors, or as we call them, your cohort. And to understand if they have a different profile than you do. So it might be, for example, that somebody who's essentially publishing the same kind of literature you're publishing is really doing well in the New York Times. That tells you it's not about the subject. That tells you they have some program that's effective. Whether it be pay to play or what, I don't know, but that's the kind of thing you can learn from these kinds of analytics. So what we're really doing is taking all the pieces of the donut and letting you take them apart and reassemble them in ways that give you intelligence about social engagement. I'm going to do a real quick look ahead at the next Visor, out past social Visor. This is the institutional prospect Visor I'm going to talk about. Now, we had conversations with several publishers. We're not done the conversations yet, but we had the beginning ones with some publishers to understand how they prospect for institutions now. And we found that people basically prospect one part of a matrix. It's a 3 by 3 matrix. They prospect by institution, by journal, and by geography. In other words, you look for which institutions are good candidates to sell subscriptions to, which journals seem to be performing in your same market not as well as others, and then which geographies are you underrepresented. So that's one part of the matrix. The other part is whether you pay attention to current subscribers, lapsed subscribers, or totally unknown to you subscribers. So it's essentially a 3 by 3 matrix. What we're looking at, this is I'll call it an early stage prototype, is to be able to show you essentially a comparator that lets you look at institutions. Those are the horizontal bars. Journals, that's up in the top right, and then geography, which is in the bottom right. And then a time dimension along the bottom, so that you can look, for example, at the Gabiz Institute of Technology is your most turned away institution. You can click on that institution to drill down. Well, it looks like I'm drilling down on Penn State. I'm popping up Penn State information here. And to see something about the characteristics of that institution to know whether it is a good prospect. You can see which journals, for example, are getting most turned away. Is it a particular journal, or is it level across all of your journals? And this is an example of the drill down. And what's interesting about this particular drill down is it says the very high number of turnaways of that institution started in October. This is a mock-up from last year. So before, they weren't even aware of your content. And most of the turnaways are for new journal B, the red color. So it gives you a sense about what you might approach this institution to talk about. And of course, you might go on to look at a particular geography. Perhaps you're sending a sales rep into a region and want to explore who are the prospects in that region. Next component, this is now for all Visors, will have an alerting function. Jim, are you doing this one? You can do it, yeah. Okay, just sorry. Jim and I switched who was doing which pieces. I was reading the wrong set of notes. So what we found in working with the early users of Impact Visor is that people love the information, they don't have the time to go get it. And so what we said is, okay, that's just like your researchers and readers. They want all your information, but they don't have the time to go look for it. So how do you bring it to them? Well, you produce alerts. And in conversations with publishers, particularly at our London spring meeting, we talked through use cases of alerts, and we found the top two use cases are pretty important. One is a threshold-triggered use case. In other words, tell me whenever an institution's pay-per-view price goes above when an institution's cost per use goes above my pay-per-view price. Tell me that. Just send me an alert. And you can apply this, tell me whenever an article's citations go over 50. Tell me when an article doubles its number of citations. Those are examples of the threshold-triggered alerts. But we found an interesting use case, the second blue line, what I'll call date-triggered alerts. And this says, every month or every quarter or every year, send me a report, a dashboard that shows me the key factors about something. So this might be, show me my top 5 articles every month. Show me my most cited articles every month. Show me a trend line for citations year to date every quarter. And these are essentially database reports that are delivered in email, but they're delivered in a way, we think it's going to be delivered in a way that they could be interactive. So if you or an editor wants to drill down further, you can. And these reports would be delivered to whoever you say to deliver them to. You might set one up for delivery to your associate editor group, for example. So that's where we're going with alerts in Visors. I want to mention that we have 2 Visor breakouts today. We have a breakout that will go into much more detail. Jim and I are doing the breakouts. Today's is on Usage Visor, Social Visor, and Institutional Prospect Visor. Friday's is on Impact Visor. It's an Impact Visor user group, plus alerts, plus author prospector, finding the best authors to locate, to attract and retain. And then the potential for some new visors based on predictive analytics, one that I'm calling Fate Predictor Visor. That sounds ominous, I know. And one of the things we'll do in these breakout sessions is review some of the feedback we've gotten from the publishers. It's a good way for you to say, well, my feedback is the same or my feedback is different. And that'll help us in the design and the rollout of the visors. Thanks. What's the lunchtime? Starts at 12:20. Okay, we have 4 minutes for questions.
One quick disclaimer. We are at the press club. What John said, he was not indicating that the New York Times was a pay-for-play publication. It's a mainstream media that could be influenced. Questions about the Visor program?
Oh, sorry, in the front? And then we'll
Hi, yeah. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Mark Jacobson from Delta Think. In looking at the social visor, I'm wondering if you'd given any thought to including sentiment analysis so that it's not just they're talking, but is it good talk or not so good?
Sure. It's a good set of questions. What we found in doing the user interviews on social Visor is there's a lot of variety out there about what people care about and don't care about. So what we've decided to do next is get something very basic out there that will essentially attract comments and feedback from our customers about what they want next. That worked pretty well for Impact Visor. So no, not doing sentiment analysis in this go-round. One of the things that came up in the social visor feedback is that people said, you know, thanks for the analytics, what I really need is help creating the social content. And that's what led to things like the Twitter cards, stuff that Jim referred to in his previous presentation. So sometimes the feedback goes other places than just into the Visor program. So in the back and then over to Barbara.
Hi, Kathleen Gaffney.
If I do this, I can see.
Two questions on Impact Visor. Does it matter which editorial system you're using, editorial submission system, as far as looking at the rejected articles? And yeah, so I guess that's my question.
No, it doesn't matter which article, which manuscript submission system that you're using. We can work with anything.
And then what is the content, what's the underlying content? Is it Web of Science that you're pulling the citation data from?
Sure. It is, there's a slide on this that I'd be glad to go over with you, go into a bit more detail. A lot of the use cases about Impact Visor had to do with knowing what's happening much more rapidly than you do by talking to Thomson Reuters. So we focused on the data sources that were most rapid in counting citations and then things that led to citations. So we focused on citations from Crossref and Scopus. Crossref is more or less immediate. Scopus is about 3 to 6 weeks behind publication, whereas in our studies, Thomson Reuters was 0 to 6 months behind. But sometimes they would catch up, and then they'd get 6 months behind. And then we added on Mendeley saves, because in a way they're still a lagging indicator, but they're not nearly as lagging as citations. And we've acquired the data for faculty of 1,000 recommendations. We haven't built it into a Visor yet, and we think that will probably be very predictive as well of eventual citations. So it's Scopus and Crossref are the data sources. Barbara.
Barbara Goldman from ASM. So I don't have a question as much as I have an observation that was something that was new to me. We're starting to pay a lot more attention to China, and I was there on a visit and discovered that I was completely ignorant and that Google, Twitter, and Facebook are all blocked in China. So if we want to start reaching out to Chinese authors or monitoring social content, social interactions in China, I guess we have to use WeChat.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to translate Chinese characters if we want to actually, unless we have people who are reading these things for us.
So I'll just give comments.
I could make something up, but I prefer
Oh,
that you do that.
All right, well, thanks. Gee, thanks. You work on that while I'm... One of the things that we've noticed in some of the performance analysis work that Dan showed you a graph showing performance is that performance in China was particularly a problem. I mean, it's like standard deviations off. And what we found in investigating is that we, like many systems, used some Google-based components, and they were being blocked. So we had to make changes to do that. So we're picking up that kind of thing. I myself haven't applied it to the social engagement or other forms. With respect to SEO, that is what we do with Google, we are trying to work with essentially the Chinese version of Google and Google Scholar. Some of you may have gotten license agreements from them. They want you to sign a license. And I mean, everybody I know has looked at this and said, what is this? Do they think we're going to pay them? It's been a challenge. Yes, Yahoo will work. For how long, I don't know, right? It depends on, is Verizon blocked? So the whole area of China is a challenge. If some of you are pretty active in working on that or worrying about it, I'd love to hear from you. We could form a special interest group to share what we're finding, because it's definitely very fragmented understanding right now.
Hi, Chris Wozniak from AACR. Are you planning on getting any more granular with your data in the usage visor than monthly? I know for us, sometimes we'll publish an article at the end of the month, and it looks like the first month's usage is 10 page views. So any plans to go beyond the month level?
Sure. So what you've noticed that Prospect Visor is coming in 2017. I'm going to get to answering your question, Chris. Institutional Prospect Visor is in 2017. And that's because it's using a much lower level of data than essentially counter standard reporting data. It's going to transaction level rather than just using monthly resolution data. And in order to get that data in a high, a productive way, we've needed to rebuild our data warehouse systems, and that work is scheduled to be done at the end of this year. So at that point, we'll start looking at how to bring in more granular data. So if in talking with publishers about Usage Visor, people told us the monthly usage was good enough for now. That is, it would be so much better just to have it in a usable form. So if you have use cases for going below that, I'd like to know what they are. You know, how would we display it? Would we do it selectively? Would we do it totally? Because it explodes pretty rapidly into data, into volumes of data. So yes, it will be possible. We do not have a plan right now, except for Prospect Visor, but we're interested in the use cases. For Social Visor, when we interviewed publishers, it was really clear that this needed to be daily, because that's the pace of social media. So we're going to be grabbing the data daily.
One more question before we cut up the donuts? Nope.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much for your attention, and please come out to the breakout sessions. Want to hear more.
Thank you.